Katey Passaniti wasn't always close to her mother, Loretta.
They never had that daughter-mom relationship.
But she was trying to fix that.
She would say, if I don't forgive, it's going to destroy me and my family.
Then tragedy struck.
My husband's laying in the floor, I think he's dead.
The investigation quickly uncovered a motive.
All of this was over money.
This is $1 million deal.
But every twist led to a new suspect.
She was a sweet little lady at church.
A lady who's never been arrested for anything.
And the authorities would be left wondering, how far would Katey go for her mother?
She said, I have to do what I can to protect her.
Keithville, Louisiana, July 25, 2010. It was a little before noon when Caddo Parish 911 received a call from the tiny crossroads 30 minutes south of Shreveport.
It was very rural, out in the country, a lot of farmland.
The caller was 70-year-old Loretta Luttrell.
My husband's laying in the floor, I think he's dead.
At first, the call didn't appear too out of the ordinary.
How old is your husband?
He's 73.
73?
She got home from church, she discovered the body, and then she called 911.
She was very matter of fact. He's dead, come get him.
But then Loretta said something which indicated that what had started out as a routine call reporting the death of an elderly man was actually something else entirely.
His hands are tied behind him and he's just a
73-year-old Ernest Luttrell had been murdered.
He had several gunshot wounds.
The dispatcher immediately routed the authorities to the scene.
I got some help on the way, ma'am, okay?
And then, while waiting for the deputies and EMTs to arrive, the dispatcher asked if she could contact Loretta's next of kin.
Do you have any family close by you can contact?
No.
Loretta only had one child, 55-year-old Katey Passaniti, but she wasn't close.
She's in San Antonio.
And considering their history, distance wasn't the only thing separating mother and daughter. Born when her mother was only 15, Katey and Loretta had never been close.
They never had that daughter-mom relationship.
My impression was Loretta just never accepted the fact that she had a child that young. I think Loretta resented it.
And she essentially gave Katey up at birth.
Loretta's mother took Katey to raise.
She called her grandmother Mama. She called her mother Loretta.
But even without her mother, Katey seemed to have a happy childhood.
She loved her grandmother tremendously. She had kids to play with. She had a safe, good environment.
It wasn't until Katey was 15 that her mother took a bigger role in her life. By then, 31-year-old Loretta had been living with Ernest Luttrell for nearly 10 years.
She had taken his last name, but they were never married. They passed themselves off as married.
Katey went to live with Ernest and Loretta, but the mother-daughter reunion wasn't exactly a happy one.
She started to have behavioral problems. She would often rebel against, anything that they had to say. She would, run away a lot.
And the rebellious teen didn't seem to connect with her mother or her stepfather.
She called her Loretta and she called my brother Ernest. She never looked at it, I guess, like a mama and a daddy.
The relationship between Katey and Ernest was not close.
The relationship between Katey, Loretta, and Ernest grew even more distant once Katey went to college.
She was incredibly intelligent. She got accepted to some pretty prestigious colleges.
And by the time she finished graduate school, she had racked up an impressive array of credentials.
She had a degree in chemistry, and she had a PhD in applied mathematics from Johns Hopkins University.
She also met a young man in one of her college classes, Anthony Passaniti.
We were in the classroom. She tapped my shoulder and asked for a piece. Did I have any gum? And of course, more than glad. Yes, I'll go find some if I don't have any.
Within days, they were dating. In less than a year, they were married. And 2 years after that, at age 27, Katey gave birth to a daughter.
She was a very, very loving mother. We managed to balance, sort of, you're home when I'm not, and I'm home when you're not, and raised a beautiful little girl.
The family eventually settled in San Antonio, Texas. Anthony worked as a physician's assistant, while Katey taught chemistry and math courses at several local colleges.
He was doing relatively well as a PA. She had a good salary as a professor.
However, in 2008, with their daughter now in college, Katey, now in her 50s, gave up that salary to become a mother again.
They adopted a young child.
Given Katey's background, family was very important. She wanted family, she wanted kids.
In fact, while raising her adopted daughter, Katey even made a belated effort to reconnect with her own mother.
She would say, if I don't let it all go, if I don't forgive, if I don't treat them decently, it's going to destroy me and my family.
Katey and Loretta did become closer as Katey got older.
We would go out of the way, to go there for holidays, to keep that family bond going.
By the time Katey adopted her daughter, Loretta and Ernest were both retired and living on a 60-acre farm outside Shreveport in the small town of Keithville.
They built the log home and they had a barn, and then he started, his hay business when he retired, which, was a good little business, and he would make, a fair amount of money.
But in 2008, the farm had produced a crop far more valuable than hay.
He cashed in on some mineral rights.
As it turned out, Ernest and Loretta's farm was sitting on top of a natural gas field.
The Pinnacle Oil Company had paid him $400,000 for his mineral rights, and overnight, Mr. Luttrell became, for him, a very rich man.
Not that Ernest did much with the money.
He didn't spend a lot of his money. He wanted to save it. He had pretty much everything he wanted.
He's continued to bale hay. He continued to do things on his property. He never changed.
But even as the couple had become financially secure, a new issue suddenly surfaced, one that threatened to rob them of their golden years. The trouble started when Katey noticed that her mother's phone calls were becoming a bit peculiar.
She would call Katey, and she couldn't remember how to make a cake. She'd say, "Do I put sugar in it?"
And it wasn't just Loretta who was having trouble.
Ernest and Loretta tried coming down for Thanksgiving. Ernest got halfway here, got lost, got confused, turned around and went back home.
Soon, the doctors confirmed what Katey suspected.
Both Mr. and Mrs. Luttrell had been diagnosed with onset Alzheimer's dementia.
6 hours away in San Antonio, Katey did what she could to help.
She would speak with her mother on the phone almost daily.
Loretta had day-to-day help around the house, too. Tina Van Moorque, whose boyfriend worked for Ernest on the farm.
They lived on the property behind the Luttrell's home in a mobile home.
Tina Van Moorque was hired kind of to keep up the house. She was also a chauffeur for Mrs. Luttrell, who could no longer really drive.
But while Tina and her boyfriend could keep up the house and farm, it was soon evident that Ernest needed more than just a hired hand.
His dementia was progressing more rapidly, his confusion, his memory loss, and his irritability.
Ernest's anger was mostly directed at one of the Luttrell's neighbors.
We were getting phone calls from Loretta that Ernest is going over to the neighbor's house and telling the neighbor that he put a fence on Ernest's property.
And in April of 2010, giving Katey power of attorney and demanded to go home.
He said, "Well, I never signed that. Get me out of here."
He also denied threatening his neighbor.
He said, "I never threatened him. I never threatened him. I don't understand why I'm here, and why can't I go home?"
After a week of evaluations, Ernest got his wish. The doctors released him over Katey's objections.
LSU fought us, his family fought us, And again, what are you going to do?
He was quite lucid in the hospital. That's one of the reasons the doctors let him go.
But it wouldn't be long, just over 2 months before Katey got another urgent call about Ernest. Only this time it wasn't because Ernest was back in the hospital. It was because he was dead. Coming up, Loretta reports a deadly break-in.
Whoever killed him took the guns and left in his truck.
And a break in the case seems too incredible to be true.
That's the kind of thing you think, no way.
On July 25, 2010, in rural Keithville, Louisiana, 70-year-old Loretta Luttrell returned home from church and found her husband, Ernest, lying on their kitchen floor, dead of multiple gunshot wounds.
You don't want to try CPR?
It's no need. I swear it's no need. Please come on.
Man, look at this. Listen to me.
I can't take it.
Sheriff's deputies raced to the scene. When they arrived, they found Loretta, who suffered from Alzheimer's, waiting outside.
She was not overly upset, but she seemed a little confused, didn't know what to do.
Ernest was in the kitchen, just as Loretta described.
He's laying there dead, puddle of blood around him.
He had been shot multiple times.
One was actually to his head.
In the living room, a gun cabinet stood open, its contents gone.
Miss Luttrell told us that gun cabinet had been full of guns.
It did have all the components of a robbery.
Ernest's guns weren't the only things missing. His truck was gone, too.
And we can only assume that whoever killed him and took the guns left in his truck.
If that were true, it was a lucky break for the investigators.
There were some things that were very unique about it.
It had a homemade fuel tank on the bed that Mr. Luttrell used to fuel up his farm equipment.
Within 48 hours, detectives had located the truck and identified a man who had been seen driving it. A 26-year-old named Eric Crane. He was no stranger to the authorities.
He was a drug abuser. He had been in and out of jail.
On Tuesday morning, 2 days after the shooting, Caddo Parish deputies took Eric into custody. But once he was transported to the sheriff's office for a formal interview, he denied any knowledge of the murder.
And who is this Mr. Luttrell that you're talking about?
He was the man who put all the bullets in.
I didn't shoot nobody. I don't even know Mr. Luttrell.
Again.
He's not cooperative, but he's not aggressive by any means. He was just playing dumb.
But later that afternoon, just hours after learning of Eric Crane's arrest, a television news crew from Shreveport was at the body shop where he worked, trying to get some background information.
We went into the office, sat down. I actually sat down with one of Eric Crane's co-workers, and that's when the phone rang.
According to the caller ID, the call was coming from the Caddo Parish Jail.
Eric decides to call his ex-employer and share with his ex-employer that he was in jail.
In fact, prompted by his co-worker, he confessed to murder.
Eric, did you kill him or what?
Yeah, I killed him.
However, according to Eric, the motive wasn't robbery. He claimed that Loretta's housekeeper, Tina Van Moorcue, had hired him to kill Ernest.
She said, hey, you want to make a quick $1,000?
But why kill Ernest? According to what Tina had supposedly told Eric, it was because Loretta wanted her husband dead.
The most shocking part of the phone call was when he went into detail and he said that Tina said the old woman wanted her to. That's the kind of thing you think, no way. She was at church. She was a sweet little lady at church while her husband was shot. There's no way she could have put someone up to this.
And within hours, a tape of the entire incredible call was in the hands of the investigators.
Tina was part of it, and maybe the wife was part of it. You know, he gave us a lot of clues aside from his own confession.
The following day, Wednesday, July 28th, the investigators brought Tina Van Moorcue in for questioning.
She denied any involvement in the murder, any knowledge about the murder.
I love the Luttrills. They give us a place to stay for free. I work for them, I make good money, and I wouldn't want nothing to happen to them.
Still, the police were suspicious, and they had reason to doubt Tina's honesty.
After the murder, we find in her purse several $100s in cash. We find Loretta's ATM card.
Not only that, the Luttrells had caught Tina stealing from them a few months earlier.
They filed a report but then dropped it.
When they dropped the charges, Ernest and Loretta said they had worked it out with Tina.
She was supposed to be paying them back.
But the police were starting to wonder. Had Ernest discovered that she was still stealing from them? Was that the motive for his murder? After being grilled for several hours by the investigators, Tina broke down and admitted that she had hired Eric. But she claimed it was Loretta who had put her up to it.
Loretta came to you and said she wanted Ernest dead?
Yeah, she said that's the only way out.
According to Tina, the murder was due to money. Specifically, money Ernest had promised to Loretta's granddaughter to help pay off her student loans.
Loretta's granddaughter, her tuition bills had gotten up to, I heard, about $50,000.
But when the time had come to pay up, Ernest had apparently gone back on his promise.
Tina was telling us he wrote her a check for $1,000, and that made Loretta mad.
Loretta was so mad, according to Tina, that she had her hire Eric to kill Ernest for the same amount, $1,000.
Loretta had told him to make it look like a robbery and he could take the guns and stuff. Loretta told me to tell him that he could have the guns.
But was it even possible? Was a woman suffering from Alzheimer's actually behind the murder plot? The investigators wanted more proof before arresting a 70-year-old woman for murder.
We asked Tina if she would make a phone call to Miss Luttrell.
Tina readily agreed.
I think that in her mind at that point, I'll be the one that will testify against Crane and against Loretta.
From the interrogation room, she called Loretta on her cell phone while the investigators listened in.
I'm not sure if they're going to put me in jail. Eric, the man, shot Ernest for you, he managed to get out on bond about an hour ago, and he called me and looking for $1,000 so he can get out of town.
Loretta did say, okay, let me try to get you the money.
Loretta agreeing to pay Ernest's confessed killer was all the proof the investigators needed.
We were able to get a warrant.
The next day, July 29th, was Ernest's funeral. And when Loretta left the cemetery after the graveside service, the deputies were waiting.
She was arrested right outside the gate of the cemetery.
We had one of our marked units stop her.
In the interrogation room, Loretta denied being the mastermind behind Ernest's murder.
She tried to push everything off on Tina.
She wanted rid of Ernest because she thought, she had me fooled. She could get anything she wanted out of me.
However, Loretta seemed to admit being in on the plot.
She wasn't real clear about why, but she knew what had happened.
So you knew that when you came home Sunday, what you were going to find. You knew what was going to happen that day.
Yeah.
And that's why you weren't there.
I was there.
You were at church.
I go to church every Sunday.
She didn't understand why they're blaming her for it. She seemed to think whatever took place that Tina had done this.
At the end of the interview, the Caddo Parish authorities booked Loretta on murder charges, despite the fact that she was suffering from Alzheimer's.
The idea that she somehow orchestrated this, that she was somehow the mastermind, never made any sense.
That was definitely the position of Loretta's daughter, Katey Passaniti. While her mother was being questioned, Katey was outside the sheriff's office talking to the media.
She was very emotional, very adamant that her mother could not have done something like this.
Ernest's family tended to agree. Quietly, over the next several days, they let the sheriff's investigators know that they had another suspect in mind. Katey.
The family of Ernest Luttrell suspected Katey, and they kept trying to tell everyone that Katey has got to be involved.
We felt sure that Katey was involved in it.
We knew in our guts.
At first, the investigators didn't take the family's suspicions seriously.
It's just family feuding type stuff.
And And initially, it looked as if the investigators were right. After Loretta's arrest, Ernest's family launched a legal battle to claim his sizable estate.
It was probably worth the entire estate around $1.2 million.
Under normal circumstances, Loretta would have inherited.
If Loretta died first, it went to him, or if he died first, it went to Loretta. It was the way it was set up.
However, since Loretta was in jail for Ernest's murder, settling his estate was shaping up to be a free-for-all.
Several people were filing their interest into the estate.
But when Katey produced her copy of Ernest's will and filed it with the probate judge, it appeared that she held the trump card, a clause spelling out what happened to the $1.2 million if Loretta couldn't inherit.
That gave Katey Passaniti and her 2 daughters all of Ernest's estate.
Ernest's family was outraged at being cut out of his estate, but they were also suspicious. The will Katey filed, the one that gave her everything, was dated less than 3 weeks before Ernest's murder. Coming up, the investigators turn up the heat on Katey.
They rammed the door in with a battering ram.
But will they find any evidence against her?
To get to a murder charge, you gotta have somebody on the inside.
By August of 2010, it looked as if the murder of Ernest Luttrell was all but solved. On July 25th, the 73-year-old had been shot to death in his home outside Shreveport, Louisiana, and 3 people had been charged in connection with the murder. Ernest's wife, Loretta Luttrell, her housekeeper, Tina Van Moorcue, and the friend that Tina had accused of being the trigger man, Eric Crane.
It was a quick investigation, and I mean, when the dominoes began to fall, they fell quickly.
But was there still one domino to fall?
There was a nagging concern to some law enforcement officers that Katey Passaniti had the most to gain from Mr. Luttrell's death.
If Loretta was unable to inherit, Ernest's will left his entire $1.2 million estate to Katey and her daughters.
All of his property, the money, the land, the house, everything.
However, Ernest's family doubted he would give everything to his stepdaughter.
It was totally out of his character. They didn't have that kind of relationship.
And with Loretta in custody accused of murder, Ernest's family filed court proceedings challenging the inheritance.
A large fight went on for several months while they tried to decide who's actually supposed to get the money from the estate.
The probate attorneys weren't the only ones poring over Ernest's will, though. The Caddo Parish homicide investigators were also starting to suspect there was something fishy about the document.
Some of the signatures we could look at and tell that they just didn't look right.
Was the will that gave Katey control of Ernest's $1 million estate a forgery? Hoping for answers, on October 19th, the investigators contacted the Shreveport notary whose name was on the will, a woman named Penny Penner.
We said, look, what's this will here? Did you sign this? She said, yeah. It was done on July 1st, a whole month before Ernest was killed. And Ernest was there, and I went to his house, and Loretta was there, and everybody was there, and it was all legit.
But then, the investigators interviewed one of the witnesses who had signed the will.
That witness who signed that on the will said, look, I'm not lying for anybody.
She said it was a forgery.
In fact, according to the witness, the will wasn't just a forgery. She hadn't signed it until after Ernest's murder.
So we went back to Penny Penner and we said, look, Penny, we know the deal here. You lie. What's going on?
At that point, she says, yeah, I'm not going to lie anymore with this when it happened.
Confirming the other witness's account, the notary said that after the murder, she'd been approached by Katey Passaniti. Katey had claimed she was worried about Loretta's inheritance.
In Louisiana, if you are not married, you don't have any rights of inheritance from somebody if you're just living with them.
Penny Penner said she thought she was trying to help Loretta.
And now, since she was facing possible criminal charges, the notary agreed to help the investigators.
She agreed to make a few phone calls to Katey Passaniti.
In the calls, Penny told Katey that the investigators had contacted her, and she asked what to say about notarizing Ernest's will.
hopefully that Ernest was standing there.
You know that's not true.
And I know it, and you know it.
Katey Passaniti, admits in the phone calls that, Ernest wasn't there, he was dead.
Over the phone, the two women came up with a cover story. But when the notary appeared to struggle over the details, it was Katey's turn to be helpful.
I could write everything down.
Within weeks, Caddo Parish investigators and local police descended on Katey Passaniti's San Antonio home with a search warrant.
We were looking for any document that talked about Ernest Luttrell, his finances, wills, any powers of attorney.
It was a shock. It was a brutal shock.
When the police knocked, Katey came to the door, but only for a moment.
When they said it's the police, we have a search warrant, she turned and started to run back in the house.
The investigators were right behind her, coming through the door as Katey ran for her purse.
She could have a weapon concealed, so they go and restrain her.
They pushed her against the wall, handcuffed her on the couch.
But when they searched Katey's purse,
there wasn't any weapon, but the letter of instruction was laying at the top of the purse.
And the instructions to the notary weren't all that the investigators found either.
We seized boxes and boxes and boxes of documents.
We found several duplicate copies of forged powers of attorney in her home.
They also found pages and pages of notes about Ernest's estate and his medical condition in Katey's handwriting.
Katey is a habitual note writer, and she would write questions and answers to herself, or just thoughts to herself.
And the investigators were convinced that one note summed up the entire case.
This is $1 million deal, and underlines it.
However, while the reams of evidence looked like more than enough to convince the probate court that Katey had forged Ernest's will, there was one thing that was conspicuously absent.
There wasn't anything about the murder.
And with no evidence tying Katey to the murder, there was little Caddo Parish investigators could do but remove the handcuffs and release her.
What they finally said was, okay, we're through here. We're out of here.
But the fact that the search had failed to find evidence to support murder charges didn't deter the investigators. Once back in Caddo Parish, they decided to pursue a different route. The three alleged co-conspirators.
To get to a murder charge, it's very difficult in a conspiracy if you don't have a conspirator that gives the information. You gotta have somebody on the inside.
The prosecutors quickly ruled out Katey's mother, Loretta, as a candidate for their inside source. Suffering from Alzheimer's and held without bail ever since her arrest, her mental condition had rapidly deteriorated.
She was falling apart, and the Alzheimer's took over.
In fact, the disease had advanced to the point that there was no chance Loretta would even stand trial.
The judge found her incompetent to proceed and committed her indefinitely to a mental facility for the criminally insane.
With Loretta in no shape to testify, the prosecutors shifted their focus to the admitted triggerman, Eric Crane. In June of 2011, he pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
His agreement was to testify truthfully against anyone else that he had knowledge of that was involved in this murder.
Next, the district attorney put pressure on the woman who had brought him into the murder plot, Loretta's housekeeper, Tina Van Moorcue.
Notification was filed that we would be seeking the death penalty against Tina.
And that was all it took for Tina to roll over. In exchange for a life sentence, she pleaded guilty, agreed to testify against Katey, and made a new videotaped statement naming Katey as the one behind the murder plot.
Katey said that she wanted me to find somebody to kill him and to make sure they'd done the job right and to make sure he was dead.
In return, Tina said Katey and Loretta promised she could continue to live on the farm.
That's what they was going to give me out of the deal, that I could just always live out there for free for finding a hitman.
It had been more than a year since Ernest's murder, but thanks to Tina's statement, the Caddo Parish authorities finally got a warrant for Katey's arrest. And on March 22, 2012, the police were once again on Katey's San Antonio doorstep. And this time, they didn't knock.
They rammed the door in with a battering ram.
And then, as her husband looked on, the San Antonio police led Katey away in handcuffs.
And I raised hell, just ranting.
You're talking about a lady who's never been arrested for anything, not a misdemeanor, not a traffic ticket.
Coming up, the prosecution's case comes unraveled in court.
Eric Crane said he had never seen her before.
And Katey's ailing mother ends up holding the keys to her daughter's fate.
Loretta would do anything in the world to please Katey Passaniti.
On April 25, 2013, Katey Passaniti went on trial at the Caddo Parish Courthouse in Shreveport, Louisiana, facing multiple charges connected with the July 2010 murder of her stepfather, Ernest Luttrell. If convicted, the 57-year-old PhD faced life in prison.
You had murder and forgery. It was very much a white-collar, murder-for-hire homicide, if that makes any sense, combined all into one case.
But according to the prosecutor's opening statement, all of it, the murder and the forgeries, stemmed from a single motive: Katey's desire to cash in on Ernest's $1 million estate.
All of this was over money. She was just absolutely voraciously greedy to get this man's money, everything he had. And if it took her mother, if it took his life, her mother's life, didn't matter.
Although according to the prosecution's theory, Katey hadn't initially set out to kill Ernest. They believe that her original plan had been to have Ernest committed after he allegedly threatened his neighbor in April of 2010.
Katey Passaniti took a forged power of attorney to LSU Medical Center and started waving it around to anybody who would listen, saying, I want him in a nursing home.
But the doctors had sent him home instead.
When Plan A failed, she went to Plan B.
When all other attempts to get at his money failed, that was the plan, to kill him.
And considering her mother's advancing Alzheimer's, the clock was ticking.
If he outlived her, in the will, he would have everything. And that would give him full access to the will, where he can completely cut Katey out of everything.
It was important that Mr. Luttrell die first.
To explain just how Katey had allegedly arranged the hit, the prosecutors called housekeeper Tina Van Moorcue to the stand. She testified that considering Loretta's mental state, it was easy for Katey to get her mother to go along.
Loretta would do anything in the world to please Katey Passaniti.
Loretta felt guilty because she gave Katey away, because whatever Katey wanted, Katey got.
Although Tina claimed that she had been an unwilling accomplice.
She cried when she talked about the things that Uncle Ernest had done for her.
But Katey wouldn't take no for an answer, according to Tina.
She testified at the trial that the pestering by Katey Passaniti to get this thing done, to find a killer, was relentless.
She said that she was told by Katey that if she did not do this, that she would be thrown off of this farm and she would never be able to live there again.
On cross, the defense claimed that Tina also stood to gain from Ernest's death.
If Tina is the one taking care of Loretta, she gets Ernest out of the picture, she can do whatever she wants.
She's constantly stealing from the Luttrells while working for them.
And they claimed that Katey had been well aware of the theft.
Katey told Loretta that she should get rid of Tina.
But according to the defense, the biggest problem with Tina's story was the fact that she didn't implicate Katey until more than a year after the murder.
She never gave a statement that implicated Katey until right before she received her deal for a life sentence.
And that was despite the fact that the investigators had asked her point blank whether anyone else was involved in the conspiracy.
Anybody else know about this?
No, sir.
You haven't told anybody?
Just me, Eric, and Loretta.
Thanks to an aggressive cross-examination by Katey's attorneys, Tina's testimony may not have been quite as convincing as the prosecutors hoped. But they still had one more shot: the testimony of Ernest's confessed killer, Eric Crane.
It was very as a matter of fact. I did this, I walked in, I shot him, and killed him.
There was no sense of regret or remorse. There was nothing there.
Unfortunately for the prosecutors, emotion wasn't the only thing missing from Eric's testimony.
Eric testified that he had only spoken with Tina, that he knew Loretta was involved, but that no one had ever mentioned Katey to him.
On cross, Katey's attorneys leapt at the chance to further distance their client from the murder.
They said, "Have you ever seen this woman before?" He said, "No, I've never seen her."
And that wasn't all he said.
Eric Crane actually testified that if Katey had been involved, he absolutely would have known it.
By the time the prosecution rested, their case against Katey was looking anything but airtight.
I never really got the sense that there was that moment where, okay, she's guilty.
Therefore, it was something of a shock when the defense opened its case with a confession.
We absolutely admitted to and owned the forged will because that is something that she did.
Although according to the defense, the forgery had nothing to do with murder. They argued that Katey had told the notary the truth, that the forgery was simply a safeguard to ensure that her mother inherited Ernest's estate.
That was kind of the whole theme to our defense was, yes, maybe she made some mistakes, but she made them for the right reason.
She said, I actually love Loretta. She said, I never really realized before that she is my mother, and I have to do what I can to protect her.
The jury wouldn't hear those reasons from Katey, though. The defense had decided not to put her on the stand.
When somebody is in that position in their own trial, their freedom's at stake. That's heavy. That's a lot of pressure for somebody to be under.
Instead, the defense built their case around evidence from the last confessed member of the conspiracy, Katey's mother, Loretta Luttrell. Suffering from Alzheimer's and confined to a state hospital for the criminally insane, Loretta was unable to testify in court. But the defense did play the police interview recorded after her arrest, the one where she confessed to being in on the plot to kill Ernest.
That was chilling. This frail old woman, and here she is helping to plan her husband's murder.
However, despite being asked directly about it on several occasions, Loretta never named her daughter as a co-conspirator.
When she was questioned specifically about the involvement of Katey, she always maintained nobody was involved except for me, Tina Van Markue, and the person she hired to be the hitman.
Nobody else in your family knew what was going to happen?
No.
They didn't know that you had talked about this with Tina?
No.
Coming up, will the jury find Katey guilty?
She's an evil person. All she thought about was Katey.
Or will they set her free?
She did a very good job keeping herself distant.
Shreveport, Louisiana, May 4th, 2013. After only an hour and a half of deliberations, the jury announced it had reached a verdict in the trial of Katey Passaniti. According to the prosecutors, the 57-year-old PhD and mother of two had masterminded the 2010 death of her stepfather, Ernest Luttrell.
She wasn't the actual shooter, but she aided and abetted the actual shooter by providing planning, providing opportunity.
But had they proved their case?
If she is guilty of this crime, she did a very good job keeping herself distant from all that.
Not distant enough, according to the jurors. They found Katey guilty on multiple counts.
They found her guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of conspiracy to commit second-degree murder, guilty of forging his will, and guilty of forging his 2 powers of attorney.
The verdict took Katey by surprise.
Her reaction is a mixture of shock, how could this happen, confusion, but I didn't do anything. She was just kind of numb.
She was convicted by a jury of being unpleasant.
Ernest's family felt relieved and grateful.
We thanked each one of the jurors as they come out for giving us justice for my brother.
She's an evil person. She didn't care about him. She didn't care about Loretta. All she thought about was Katey.
Sentenced to life without parole, Katey continues to maintain that she's innocent.
My main concern was, don't give up hope. She's realizing, gee, I've fallen down a very deep hole. I think she's really starting to realize that now.
Music, the holiday season is often seen as one of the happiest times of the year, but for many of us, it can also be one of the most stressful times of year. But still, the holidays are not a time that you would expect to be littered with true crime stories and countless unsolved cases, but I'll let you in on a little-known secret. More crimes are committed during the holidays than any other time of year, and today we be discussing the 12 crimes that were committed during the music holidays. Danny Kelly Jr. was a professional boxer, but he was also a family man. Danny was having a night out with his family and his 3 children on Christmas Eve back in 2021. They were all out driving around town when all of the sudden things took an unexpected turn. He's believed to have been heading home after a shopping trip with his family when things went south. Danny was the one driving that evening when the family's car drew closer to a man named Merrill Lewis. At some point during their journey, Merrill seems to have become irritated at Danny, but we don't know exactly why. It seems like Merrill believed that Danny had cut him off in traffic or something, but the details have never been publicly explained, at least not in any clear way. Without any warning, Merrill whipped his car in front of Danny's, cutting him off in the middle of traffic. Then, unprovoked, Merrill pulls out a weapon and begins firing at Danny. Unfortunately, Danny was struck by several of these rounds, and his life was stolen from him right there in front of his family, including his girlfriend and 3 children aged 4, 7, and thankfully Merrill was held accountable and was sentenced to 80 years in prison. It was Christmas Eve of 2002 when Gonhola and her 2 daughters aged 20 and 15 were at their home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Jean had recently divorced her husband after he was arrested for allegedly having intimate relationships with his daughters. A judge ordered that he stay away from the family after he was released on bail, but Ernest Hulver, the father, had other plans. His brother drove him to his wife's home one evening and waited in the car while Ernest went inside and claimed the lives of his entire family, fearing that they would testify against him in court. In the end, police didn't need his family to testify because his own brother came clean with investigators. In the end, Ernest was sentenced to life in prison, and his brother was given 25 years in prison for his part in conspiring against the family. This crime takes us all the way back to 1881 in Ashland, Kentucky. Emma Caro was having a night out with her friends and neighbors Robert and Fanny Gibbons. All 3 of them were still teenagers at the time, but Emma's mother was right next door, so they weren't allowed to get up to anything too nefarious. At some point on Christmas Eve, 3 men burst into the home and claimed the lives of all 3 of the teens. After the deed was done, they set the home on fire and fled the scene of the crime. As soon as Emma's mother noticed the fire, she called for the police, but it was far too late. The charred remains of all 3 were later recovered from the rubble. The crazy thing is, no one was ever able to determine the motive behind the crime. Quite a while later, a man named George Ellis confessed to the crime and even revealed the names of his 2 accomplices, William Neal and Ellis Craft. All 3 men were convicted, with William and Ellis being hanged while George was killed by an angry mob. The men never did reveal why they had carried out the crime. Gianni Battier was talking on the phone with his cousin while he was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a Macy's in Mission Valley, California. It was Christmas Eve of 2013. Johnny had arrived at the store to pick up his fiancée, who worked there, but as he waited in the car, a man walked up to the window, fired at him, claimed his life, and then stole His car, the assailant, was later identified as Carlo Mardu. He fled the scene of the crime in John's car, but returned hours later to pick up his motorcycle that he had left behind. When he returned to the parking lot, he noticed that John's fiancée, as well as his brother, had shown up, so as not to leave any loose ends. He claimed both of their lives. Two police eventually tracked Carlo down, hoping to figure out the motive behind the crime, but there wasn't one. In fact, Gianni had never even met any of these people before. Even all these years later, Carlo has never revealed his motive. Considering his motorcycle had broken down earlier that day, it could be assumed that he carried out the crime simply because he didn't have a way home, but in truth we may never know. Between December 25th and 26th of 1996, an unsettling evening unfolded in Boulder, Colorado, as John Benet Ramsey, a 6-year-old girl and child beauty pageant star, mysteriously disappeared from the sanctuary of her own home. As reported by CNN, her parents soon stumbled upon a ransom note instructing them to pay $118,000 for the safe return of their daughter. Her parents immediately called the police. A thorough examination of the property yielded a shocking revelation that there were no signs of forced entry. In the quest for clues regarding the abduction of the young girl, John Rams, her father, came across a haunting crime scene within the recesses of the family home. He unearthed the lifeless body of his daughter, which had been stowed away in the basement. An autopsy painted a harrowing picture. John Benet had met her at demise through strangulation coupled with a disturbing skull fracture. The initial suspicions of the police took a chilling turn, implicating JN and Patricia Ramsey in the heinous crime, positing that they'd orchestrated a chilling story with a falsified ransom note to hide their involvement. But despite a highly publicized investigation, no evidence was found to support this theory. The trajectory of the investigation then pivoted towards an alternate theory, that of an intruder who broke into the home in the middle of the night. The intention was presumably to abduct John Benet, yet the outcome proved far more tragic, with the girl losing her life purely by accident. But even this theory has yielded virtually no evidence to support it, meaning all these years later the case remains unsolved. I'm sure all of us have seen some of those terrible Christmas horror movies where someone dresses up as Santa Claus then carries out a bunch of crimes. It's become a bit of a cliché at this point, but for Bruce Parro, this wasn't the plot of some cheesy movie. This is a plan that he had carefully concocted for Christmas Eve of 2008. Bruce had recently divorced from his wife Sylvia Ortega, but he wasn't taking things well. To get back at his wife, he concocted a ridiculous plan. But as ridiculous as his plan was, well, it worked. He showed up at the Ortega family home unannounced, dressed up as Santa Claus. The family had all been casually hanging out and enjoying their Christmas Eve when Bruce unexpectedly burst through the door. As soon as he entered the room, he opened fire on everyone, literally all of them. In the end, he claimed the lives of 9 family members, including his ex-wife. He then used a homemade flamethrower to set the home on fire, then fled the scene of the crime. He read at his brother's home a short while later, where he ended his own life in one final act of violence. Once again, a motive was never revealed, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that he was simply angry with his ex-wife. But why? Well, we may never know. It was 3 days after Christmas in 1987 when Ronald Simmons walked into a law firm in Arkansas and opened fire on a receptionist who had had a crush on. He was angry because she had rejected his advances, a cliché city situation of, if I can't have you, no one can. But things would only get worse from here. Immediately after this, he headed to an oil company and claimed the life of one executive and injured another. Blinded by his own rage, he then went to his former place of work and fired at 2 more people, but they both managed to survive. Still not satisfied with what he had done, he then headed to the Woodline Freight Company and fired at another woman, but she also survived. He claimed a total of 2 lives. Then, he just sat down and waited for police to show up, but what police found out next was that 6 days before the Simmons had claimed the lives of his entire family, but continued to live in the home with their bodies for 4 full days. In total, he attempted to claim the lives of 16 people that holiday season. He was sentenced to capital punishment for his crimes. 37-year-old Patty White was a lovely young lady who heard about a woman in her area who was down on her luck. 67-year-old Michelle O'Dow had been having a difficult time during the holidays and was in a desperate need of a place to stay. Patty, being the generous lady that she was, offered to let Michelle stay in her home for a few days around Christmas time, but unbeknownst to Michelle and the people who knew Patty had been hiding a very dark secret. Patty's real plan wasn't to just simply let Michelle stay in her home. For a few days, Patty planned to rob her and her life, then stage the whole thing to look like a robber gone wrong, and that's exactly what she did. Michelle's twin brother was the one who discovered the crime scene. When he entered the home to pay Michelle a visit, he found her body buried underneath a pile of Christmas presents that had been labeled for her niece's nephews and grandchildren. Police quickly uncovered the relationship between Patty and Michelle had broken down shortly before the crime was committed, leading Patty to steal several of Michelle's credit and debit cards. Using them at various ATMs in the area, Patty White was sent into 45 years in prison on Christmas Day of 2010. Kashmir James, who was 25 at the time, was visiting a friend for Christmas. She brought her 3-year-old daughter along for the journey. The two spent some time with friends in Los Angeles, California, before deciding to head back home. Kashmir buckled her daughter into her seat, but as soon as she sat down in the driver's seat, 3 men pulled up in a car next to her and opened fire. She lost her life immediately. Her young daughter wasn't harmed, but she witnessed the entire thing, and thankfully, police were able to track down the people who had caused such an incredible amount of trauma for this young girl. And in a shocking twist, investigators learned that the crime was nothing more than a gang hit, but things only got worse from here when police learned that Kashmir wasn't even the intended victim. The entire crime had been a simple case of mistaken identity. The 3 men who were convicted of the crime also didn't even turn out to be men. They were 16-year-old boys who'd gotten caught up with the wrong group of people and were forced to end an innocent woman's life. But they'll now be spending their own lives behind bars, though one of the boys was only sentenced to 40 years around Christmas of 2014. 37-year-old Melissa Young approached her neighbor, 47-year-old Alan Williamson, offering him a Christmas present. Alan was inside Melissa's apartment when she handed the gift over, which was a pair of shoes and a calendar, but strangely Alan refused to accept the gift. It was at this point that things went off the rails. Melissa claims that she was overcome by the spirit of an Archangel Michael, who told her that she needed to claim this man's life to rid him of a demon that had possessed him. She then jabbed the man 29 times, and in the end Melissa was convicted, but it turned out that she suffered from various mental health issues. Go figure. In the end, her health problems didn't have any bearing on her sentencing, and she was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. As far as a motive, it's believed she was just angry with her neighbor for rejecting her gift, but with her compromised mental state, there's literally no telling what was really going through her mind. Roger Cooper was a manager for a Costco store in the UK, and Samina Imam was the regional manager. Technically, Roger's boss. The company had a strict policy against coworkers being in relationships with one another, but that didn't stop Roger and Samina from pursuing a romance that lasted at least 2 years. But the catch is Roger had also been dating another woman this entire time. He'd been timing her for years with his boss. Roger had finally decided that enough was enough, and he was going to break up with his girlfriend and start officially dating Samina instead. At least that's what Samina was told. In reality, Samina was about to become a victim of a heartbreaking crime, and all because Roger was too much of a coward to fess up to his actions. This all came out around Christmas of 2014. Roger couldn't come to terms with his girlfriend possibly finding out what an awful person he'd been for at least the last 2 years, so instead of being honest, he opted to claim Samina's life and put an end to this once and for all, and his brother helped him plot the whole thing. Roger plotted to claim Samina's life on December 12th, but when things didn't go according to plan, he moved the date to Christmas Eve. The two left for work separately, but planned to meet up for a sort of mini vacation, all unbeknownst to Roger's girlfriend. But first they planned to stop by Roger's brother's house, and this was the final time anyone saw Sana, and she was reported missing by her family soon after. Rather obviously, both Roger and his brother didn't know the first thing about concealing a crime, and they were found out within days. Police were able to track Samina's phone location and determined that it last pinged in the immediate vicinity of both Roger and his brother. Samina's body was found about 2 weeks after the crime was carried out, and when an autopsy was performed, it was revealed that Samina had passed away after being poisoned by chloroform. Both men were sentenced to 30 years in prison. It was the day after Christmas when CBS News ran a story about a terrible crime that had unfolded on Christmas Eve in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Police received a phone call from Dustin Klopp, who had just taken his children to his parents' house for a Christmas holiday. On the phone with investigators, Dustin reported that he'd arrived at his home to find his wife, Stephanie Kilhefner, deceased. Detectives say that the call caught them off guard because immediately after Dustin announced that he'd found the body of his wife, he also confessed that he had been the one who committed the crime and placed her there. They say they had never before received a call where someone confessed before the crime had even officially been reported. When detectives showed up a short while later, they found that Stephanie had been ambushed with an axe. By March of the following year, Dustin attempted to take his own life. While he was in police custody, he wasn't successful immediately, but when he was taken to the hospital for treatment, it was found that he was already brain dead, and he was removed from life support shortly afterward. He likely would have faced life in prison otherwise. As far as a motive, the best I can tell, Dustin's just a bad person. He'd been reported for abuse against his wife countless times in the years leading up to this. It would appear that this particular situation was just the final straw, and Dustin had finally lost his temper in a way that he couldn't come back from. Reports of violence between the two date all the way back to 2018, meaning that Stephanie had suffered at the hands of this man for at least 6 years before he finally snapped, claiming her life in a fit of rage. While all of these cases were truly terrible in their own ways, we've got to remember that the holidays are a time to be celebrating and spending time with family. So now that you've had your fix of true crime stories, why not turn off your phone and TV and spend some time with the people you care about, or at least the people that care about you, even if they may have a strange way of showing it. But happy holidays. I'll catch you guys next year.